Hi, everyone. Welcome to Litera TV. Welcome to our latest session of Lead. My name is Will. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Litera, and thrilled to be joined by Ashish and Karthik today. So this is a segment for those of you tuning in for the first time where we explore leadership from the front lines. So I'm really excited to have these two old friends of mine on who've been doing amazing things with their company over the last couple of years, and they both have amazing stories before that as well. So let's jump right in. I think so. Karthik, Ashish, first of all, just welcome and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having us. Will.
Absolutely. So we could speak a long time about your company and your journey. I think we definitely need to hear a little bit though about what the company is and how you all got to this point. So let me just start with that, I guess, context for our viewers. What is Jumbotail, and what do you guys do respectively as co-founders, but in your CEO versus COO role? So I'll let you guys take it away.
Hey, thank you. Thanks. This is Karthik, and I am a co-founder and CEO of Jumbotail. Before I go to Jumbotail, I just want to tell something about Indian grocery market. India's grocery market is about 450 to 500 billion US dollars annual. And it is 98% of that market is flowing through 10 to 12 million mom and pop grocery stores. They are everywhere. They are the lifeline. They are the economic engine for the entire grocery market. It is extremely fragmented. And despite trying like several years, for last 20 years, the big box retail format, as we have well understood in several developed parts of the world, has not worked, and it's not taken off in our country due to many different challenges. So Jumbotail is a online wholesale marketplace for food and grocery, and a new retail platform. So we aggregate all of these mom and pop stores and connect them with their suppliers ecosystem, which is brands, your CPG brands, your staples, your fruits and vegetables, and they are able to procure whatever they are selling on their shops via our platform. We are a full stack platform, so we also own and operate our supply chain. So we have fulfillment centers, warehouses, and delivery to the customer. We do the storefront delivery to the mom and pop retailers. That is the part. And then we have a fintech platform that connects mom and pop retailers, give them access to working capital credit by connecting them with the lending partners. On the demand side of the mom and pop retailers, we are now beginning to brand some of the mom and pop retailers in our platform with our own brand of convenience retail chain called J24. So J24 would be a franchised 7-Eleven or any sort of franchise grocery network across the world you've probably been more familiar with. And we are spearheading the transformation of a very, very unorganized sector into owner-owned, owner-operated. So the model here is the owner still continues to remain there. He still continues to operate there. We provide the technology, we provide the branding, we provide the processes, big box tools, all of those things for the owner to transform his store and run effectively. So we are pioneering this stuff. So what probably happened in the developed world 30 years ago is beginning to happen, and Jumbotail is in the forefront of that. So this is briefly who we are.
That's a powerful mission, Karthik, for sure. A lot you're trying to change there. Ashish, I'm curious. Tell us about your respective roles. You co-founders together, and kind of CEO and COO. How do you lead with those two roles?
So as COO, I handle the buying and selling and the category management aspects of the platform. The supply chain operations, as well as the fintech platform where we provide payment and credit options for the customers. So that's what I do. I'll let Karthik sort of talk about what his responsibilities are at scale.
Yeah, I am leading product and technology. I also have finance reporting to me. And then the entire customer side of things. So all the mom and pop customers, and also the J24 business, the customer side of it. So that reports into me, and I'm leading all of that effort.
Gotcha. So I know a lot of people dream of starting a company. What made you guys take the leap and decide to do it?
Ashish?
So yeah, sure. I think we all we both came at it from very different perspectives. I think for me, I'm a third generation apple farmer from the extreme north of India. My parents still grow apples for a living. Pretty much everybody in my family is an apple farmer, and so growing up, it was fairly closely associated with a lot of the challenges that agriculture in India faces, of which there are many. And then, I had the good fortune of right before business school, I spent a few years at BCG as a management consultant, where again did a lot of work on food and agriculture systems in India. So both, I think, personally, emotionally, as well as professionally, this has been a sector that I've been exposed to for a long period of time. It's something that attracted me because of how intractable the problem seems, how complicated it is, and just the sheer scale of what you can achieve if you really are able to actually make a dent in it. So for me, that was really the reason to do it. And before this, I spent a year growing apples with the intent of sort of trying to figure out if I could do anything on the supply side. And one of the realizations that dawned upon me after getting slapped around in the face a few times, and Karthik's smarter, so he figured this out a lot earlier, was that given how fragmented this ecosystem really is, trying to solve this from the supply side would rarely works. And so we sort of flipped the problem on its head and said, let's aggregate demand through these mom and pop retailers, and then use that as a lever to actually really solve the problems for the entire ecosystem. Karthik comes from a very different perspective, and it's that's one of the things that I enjoy working with him is how different our experiences are, but how similar in many ways our thinking is on this.
Yeah, Karthik, tell us about your
I served in the Indian Army for 10 years. I took voluntary retirement in the rank of major. I was in counterterrorism, and I did a lot of stuff in combat. 6 out of 10 years I served in active combat. And I always measured my life, like 1 unit of my work should impact the maximum people. So the best 10 years of my life I gave to the military. I impacted like probably 1 billion people straight away. What's the next biggest problem that I can solve? Food. 1 billion people were consuming food. It was so fragmented and a lot of wastage, and very, very unorganized. And I wanted to solve this problem. So even before I went to Stanford, I experimented with the startup idea of aggregating coconut farmers and tried to do. It didn't take off. A lot of learnings. The problem was too big to solve. Market wasn't ready. So I systematically prepared myself for this day for over like nearly 5 to 6 years before I started this company. By acquiring the education, by acquiring the relevant professional experiences. I worked in eBay, Flipkart for acquiring the marketplaces. And over a period of time, when the timing was right, and then I also got Ashish as the co-founder, then I knew that, okay, right now we got to launch. So that's the culminating point of the journey. So when you get your buddy, then you launch into the combat.
Exactly. Well, and then the team, even beyond your buddy, of course, which we'll talk about quite a bit, is important as you're leading too. But I think what strikes me about, even though your previous experiences were quite different, and maybe for those reasons, you came to this conclusion or this problem that you wanted to solve from different angles. The trigger was that there was this large, very impactful problem to solve. I think, what that makes me start to think about, though, is the burden then that you must feel leading when the problem you're trying to solve is so massive and impacts people. And, there's the social good angle of it as well. Of course, what any founder feels just about building a company, period. How do you lead effectively when, I'll label it burden, when you have that sort of burden hanging over you of something so impactful that you're trying to do?
Well, I think Will, one way to look at it is a burden, right? I mean, I think, but from our perspective, oftentimes it actually helps clarify your thinking, right? I mean, it makes sure that you focus on the right metrics. It will make sure that you're always focusing on, is this effort going to actually solve the real problem, or is it a vanity metric that maybe some other people are chasing? So I think if you really look at it in the right light, it actually helps you focus on the things that matter. Sure, I mean, it's a very complicated problem. There's a lot of different moving parts, and therefore, what we are essentially building is an entire ecosystem, then, rather than just sort of one aspect of it. But in our experience, I mean, it actually helps you really focus.
Yeah, the bigger the problem, that maybe the greater clarity. I think as long as you can keep that clarity, for sure, which you guys articulate very well, and it sounds like you articulate that with, you know, across the organization as well. So I want to hear how you are, how you approach leadership, building leaders within your company. I know you've got some great approaches there, and even just perspectives that you bring. So yeah, tell our viewers a little bit about how you lead and how you build leaders within Jumbotail.
So the first thing we did, even before we hired a few people, like 2 or 3 people in the company. In fact, the first 1 or 2 months, we actually enunciated our core values, which till date is published, and we institutionalized the manner in which we actually reward people and actually hire people. So we have certain peculiar, I think probably one of a kind evaluation systems across probably the globe. I don't know. So people rate each other on how well they have embodied the core values. It's a very peer-rated system in our company. So each other, they say they're supposed to write narratives. It's a very narrative culture on what are the top 3 core values that this person has embodied, and they have to give 3 specific examples. And an example has to be direct, personal, and it has to at least have occurred 3 times in their last course, and everybody writes. The second is that then they say, given my experience working with this person, how likely am I to recommend Jumbotail to my network and colleagues? So this is peer NPS, and that is it. We do not yet till date have a revenue driven reward model. We retain people for their peer leadership because we have realized that when you have a top-down managerial approach of building the company, then people optimize for the 2 eyes that are watching above them, and then they probably disregard the tens of eyes that are near them about their peers, right? Right now, the only way in which you can actually grow is to be nice to the peer. The second thing that we did for people managers, we do have people managers, very few of them, is that their ratings are directly linked to the performance of their direct reportees. So basically, if you have 5 direct reportees and each of them is getting a meets expectation, you can't get an exceed expectation because everybody met expectation. How can you exceed expectation? That means one of the 2 things. One, you are basically covering the gap by your personal endurance, which is not going to be scalable, right? Or we were doing something different, right? So therefore, the starting point of building the leadership is build your teams, and it is and the people report, and it's a direct reports, rate people, the peers rate each other, and the core philosophy is that there is a guiding set principles of core values, and care about your peers, live the values in the eyes of your peers, not in the eyes of your manager. Because this then becomes a daily affair. This becomes internalized. So if you look at, I wish I could turn the camera and show all the rooms, right? Each of our rooms are named as one of our core values. I'm sitting in think long term. And then somebody says, hey, let's have a meeting in bias for action. So to that extent, the value internalization happens in our organization. To a great extent, it has worked as a small team. So every system has to go through their own iterations. So we are still about 150 people in the company, right around the sweet spot of a small, effective social network. So therefore, it has worked. So about, when we scale to 1,500, when we become, tens of geographies, we are willing to iterate and we are willing to listen. But the core philosophy remains that you have to build your leader. That's the only way that we measure your leadership. Your leadership is not about achieving the sales numbers or revenue numbers. Your leadership is about how well have you lived the value system and how well as perceived by your peers. So these are some of the things that we have invested early on.
I love that. How, yeah, that's awesome. How has that evolved from 2 to 150? You talk about maybe some things will have to evolve, 150 and beyond, but have things changed at all? Or has this pretty much been the operating model, culturally at least?
A couple of places it has not worked out for us is, very strong set of teams. Like for example, a customer light team, what we call as a typical customer call center team, about 12 of them, they are their own peers. They all rate each other. Then it becomes a very close network of self-appreciating crowd. You're not able to actually figure out what is really happening there, right? In cases where people really want to be valued for the results they bring to the table, like, striking a great deal, a sales target, or, bringing revenue to the company, while, they love the fact that the company is valuing them for, leadership, but then they would much rather want to also be rewarded for the quantitative benefits that they're able to bring to the table, right? You could say, hey, I got the deal. The company is, staying alive or kicking, good stuff. But then, oh, I'm getting a feedback on empathy, or I'm getting a feedback and I'm not exceed expectation because I've not been acting with empathy. I'm trying to achieve my target, right? So these tensions still remain. So I think the evolution, or at least we have not yet put in place, but I think one more vector has to be introduced here for purely revenue target achieving teams, and they have to be rewarded in a little different sense. It's all about how you reward and retain. So if you promote people for purely targets, that is also not something that we would want. But you also have to respect the fact that they achieve their targets, they go out of their way to bring the numbers and do the numbers, and we need to be able to have a framework. So that evolution has not yet happened, but it is bound to happen very soon in the next 6 months.
Yeah, and I think even if the landing point ultimately needs to be something a little more blended, my hypothesis would be it's a heck of a lot harder to move from being purely, let's call it like traditional KPI results based, and try to introduce values based pieces of an assessment versus the versus the journey that you guys are going to find yourselves on.
I think it's also very difficult in certain cases where the impact is a little difficult and depends on a lot of different moving parts. So if you have a business which has 4 or 5 different moving parts and all of them need to work together, sometimes being able to actually, it becomes very difficult to figure out what the contribution was in each of those cases.
Exactly. And it sounds like, I would assume as well, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. The more cross-functional the role is, perhaps not just the accuracy of the peer assessment, but the need for that really, the clarity of a peer assessment, if you will, on saying, because it's not just this world I live in, I go outside my silo. That was good. One other thing, Ashish, I wanted to ask you, as Karthik was describing your sort of leadership and culture and I guess value setup there, language jumped out to me. So the use of language reinforcing your core values, naming the rooms against your core values. We talk a lot about how to get our core values more and more part of our culture. So I'm interested in any other examples beyond just naming the room. How do you reinforce what the values are, and is there other kind of creative things you've done with language to reinforce that?
So well, we're a multilingual company because most of our customers are very multilingual, right? I mean, shopkeepers in Bangalore, which is the our place where we're headquartered, often speak 4 or 5 different languages. Our app's been available in 4 different languages from day one. A large part of our workforce actually has mother tongues that are different from very very diverse set of mother tongues as well, right? So in our supply chain, for example, there's people who probably speak about 5 or 6 different languages, and not all of them speak all the same languages. And so one of the things that we've even in the products that we build for supply chain, you often have to incorporate non-linguistic cues, which are images, words, parables, stories, to be able to communicate to people what you're trying to do. One of the challenges of building a very culture-driven company in India is also the fact that we are also a very very diverse company and a diverse country, and that sort of magnifies the number of variables that you have to deal with. So we have a data scientist, and we have a at the same time there's a member of our team whose job is lifting 50 kilo sacks on his head, right? And how do you then translate that? So it's not just linguistic; it's also what background you come from. What things make sense to you in life, what your aspirations are. And I think we try and especially in our supply chain teams, really try and sort of link this to making the fact that food is they're not only doing something for the company, they're doing something for the country. the fact that food is important, and therefore they, translating those values into things that they're able to understand as well within their own context. I think that's really helped, drive the culture to diverse parts of the company without it necessarily being worded in exactly the same ways.
And I bet a lot of the times it doesn't come from you either, from you or Karthik. It sounds like probably it comes from others. It comes from their peer groups.
It's almost impossible, to come just from us, right? And I think that we are very fortunate to have a team which is very value and mission aligned. And I think we were lucky to start this off on day one, so it wasn't sort of an afterthought at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that founders leading by personal example is not a sufficient condition, but is a necessary condition.
Great way to put it. Yeah.
It's a necessary condition. It starts from there, and then how you reinforce, people pick it up, but it cannot come only from the bottoms up. But it is also not sufficient that only founders act. So everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
And it's also not what we say. A lot of times it's actually what you do, right? I mean, you can say a lot of different things. If people perceive something else actually happening, then, you can say whatever you want, people won't follow it.
Yeah, exactly. They'll be watching you. They'll be looking. Karthik, I'm curious, the military is obviously an organization or sets of organizations that a lot of people talk about leadership within. And I'm curious what you've brought in from your military experience, or what you're intentionally not bringing in from that experience. Almost contrast that and how you and Ashish are leading and building leaders within Jumbotail.
So even though I served in the military and I have adopted violent ways, I can say, that's kind of this thing. But I am my icon leadership, role model is Mahatma Gandhi. He is a father of our nation, and he taught us that non-violent ways of leading and perseverant ways of leading. There are two things that he said, or at least almost whatever you do will be insignificant, but it is important that you must do it. That is one of his quotes. And of course, the second one, I can't exactly say in the same. Is that first they will laugh at you, then they will ignore you, then they'll fight you, and then you will win. So any massive change goes through all of these phases. And you go and say, I want to challenge the status quo of a food and grocery ecosystem. They'll say, oh, you know what? How can you fight the Unilevers and the P&Gs of the world, or how can you find the local ecosystem? Then slowly, I think you will endure and you will get there. The large changes require that level of there. But coming back to the military, what actually taught me, there are two things. One is integrity of thought, purpose, and action. I think this is lesser. It's not, integrity is not just, many people say, oh, I'm speaking the truth, right? But integrity is about how you stand by an idea. And if you have decided your target, and if you decided that this is what you want to do, no matter what, you must endure, you must persevere, you must motivate. The second aspect of military is that we didn't have money to motivate people. You cannot motivate people to fight and walk inside minefields or walk in front of bullets by giving them additional bonuses or ESOPs. You have to show them the vision, the mission, the purpose in life.
Purpose.
And that is like right early on, kept influencing me through and throughout. Right, I try to hire people who are missionaries, who want to be hungry for impact, who are driven by purpose, who want to change the status quo, who derive satisfaction from changing the world. And those are the kind of talent that we have sought after. So military has actually taught me that it is possible to motivate people and bring the best out of them without money. Money is important, and those are some of the things that I learned and brought to the startup world.
Thank you for sharing that, Karthik. Yeah, that's great. Ashish, anything from either Karthik mentioned Gandhi, whether it's a role model for you or kind of other leadership lessons from your past experiences, apple farming or others, that you're bringing into this?
I think the value of perseverance, right? there's a lot of, I don't actually have, one person that I look to for, as a model or anything like that. I mean, I think I've been very fortunate in life to work with a lot of very interesting people who have great qualities. I try to sort of pick and choose whatever I can get. I think, but, if I look at sort of, my parents and the journey that they've had, they're obviously, they're farmers in the mountains. I've seen them really persevere behind, an ideal that they cared for. And I think for me, that's been a, big lessons for me around, a lot of times, we've tried things in the company that have not always worked, but I think if you stick with it, we've seen a lot of success, often delayed, with a lot of naysayers. But I think that's been one thing that I've always sort of prided myself on, trying to really put that into action.
Gotcha. You both mentioned a number of qualities. I'm going to force you to give me your top three each. So your top three kind of leadership qualities. Whether you feel like you're bringing them into this role or not, what would you say from your whole life of experience are the top three qualities of a good leader?
I would say, go ahead, Karthik. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead, please.
I would say the top one for me is authenticity. The second would be empathy, and the third one would be perseverance.
Okay, those are good three. Karthik, what about you?
For me, the first one is earn trust. Leaders have to earn trust of the people around them, people above them, people below them. It's extremely important. Second is act with integrity. They're always watched all the time. And I had a different word, leadership, good, what Ashish mentioned, maybe somewhere around bordering around authenticity, is vulnerability. Good leaders are all really vulnerable people. They're real human beings. Like I always never try to put up an act. Whatever I am. And if I have a problem, I just call people and I have discussed. So therefore, I bring that level of, I'm vulnerable to everything. I'm not imperfect. So I'm not, what I would like to say is I'm not trying to be perfect here. I'm not even attempting to be perfect. So I'm one among you. We're all in this together. We're all growing and learning, and being able to be vulnerable in every situation with your team is extremely important for me.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we just have a couple minutes left. You've both spoken of the importance of stories and narratives. So I was wondering if one of you could close with a story of maybe one of the challenges you faced recently and how you've led through it. I know it's got to be a quick one here, but just something to leave us with a story. I think that was one of the powerful points of your message.
I would ask Ashish to narrate how we are serving the mom and pop stores in this COVID. There is so much of danger. I think Ashish and his team is doing a wonderful job keeping the supply chains open for all the mom and pop grocery stores. Ashish? So
I think for context, India has had a pretty significant lockdown, pretty aggressive lockdown where pretty much everything was shut down for about 45 to 60 days. People weren't allowed out except for extreme provisions. A lot of supply chains were disrupted. And one of the things that, as Karthik was mentioning, we feel very, very proud about was the fact that Jumbotail continued to operate every single day throughout that. And in fact, at higher capacities than even before, the COVID lockdown struck. And, you can talk about being prepared and all of these things. And, obviously everybody sort of tries to do that. But I think the one big difference was really having invested in a culture where people really felt that what they were doing was important and critical. And really, I think the other one being that, all the leaders in the company were really out and about, be it in the stores, be it in the fulfillment centers, distribution centers, really talking to people, making sure that they felt that they weren't alone in this, right? Talking to them about their fears. We've been very fortunate that, nobody has contracted the disease, but I think there was a lot of fear. And I think as the point that Karthik made, right? You can't tell people, hey, come in, we'll give you, an extra incentive to come in. Money does not solve for fear. I think the conviction that they're part of something bigger, the fact that they're supporting a lot of people who are dependent on them, that's what really helped us achieve, make sure that the stores that depended on us, the people whose livelihoods depended on this, and then the city of Bangalore, which depended on those people to actually access food, was really a function of people going above and beyond and saying, I'm scared, I'm anxious, but I'm going to go and do my job because it's important, because it counts.
Well, there's no better story to close on. I think when you're purpose driven and what you're doing, and you build a company for that purpose, and people believe in it. COVID this year, who knows what it'll be next year.
Hopefully nothing
yeah,
like
hopefully
this.
Nothing like that. You should have the confidence that your team will navigate through that as well. So thank you guys so much, Ashish, Karthik. So good to have you. So good to see you both. And I hope you have a good evening and a good weekend. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Best of luck to Jumbotail.
Thank you very much.
Stay
Thanks
safe
to you, Will, and thanks to Litera.
Absolutely. Thank you guys. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.